It's time for the Speed Chess Championship Finals. Yesterday, after MVL shocked the world by defeating Magnus Carlsen in a match, he has to take on Hikaru Nakamura. 90 minutes of 5-minute and 1-second bonus blitz, followed by an hour of 3+1 and 30 minutes of 1+1 bullet to determine who will be the champion. Can Hikaru get a three-peat, winning it 3 years in a row, or can MVL shock everyone and beat Magnus and Hikaru on back-to-back days? Before we jump into it, there was record viewership. My channel by itself crossed almost 15,000 live viewers during the commentary, and the chess.com channel got up to 50,000 during the event. It was massive. So much thanks goes to you, either watching on Twitch or on YouTube. Let's jump into the games. We're going to begin, obviously, in the 5+1. Very first game of the match, and a lot of our openings throughout this match are going to look very similar, because the players had a strategy. Hikaru's strategy was not to play into the open Sicilian, which defines MVL's repertoire. Instead, going for one of these more closed structures, where the pawn tension in the center isn't broken so quickly. But it was broken as players continue to develop for the first time right here. This is the first move of the match, where a person crosses into their opponent's territory, indicating that they want to get going and fighting quickly. Knight d5, knight e4, and after a quick skirmish in the center, what happens? Well, Hikaru has the two bishops. The dark squared bishop is gone, and these bishops are staring at the king. Hikaru then proceeds to try to get a little something going, but MVL is very quick with that c-file counterplay, which is the patented situation of the Najdorf. Queen goes back to d3, and after a little bit of shuffling, Hikaru finally says, all right, I've had enough. And on move 28, he plays knight takes g6. He takes a pawn, which looks like it's very well protected, but he's got all these pieces lined up in this territory. He sacrifices the knight and tries to break through. MVL goes defensive mode with knight f8, rook d6, and he trades off a rook. Very important, very instructive by MVL. Queen g5, knight e5, and here Hikaru missed an opportunity to increase the pressure with the move bishop to e4 instead of going for f4. MVL should have backed up to f7, sacrificing his pawn but getting the queens off the board. Instead, he lurched forward, take, and after a simplification of some material, we have a spot where rook c5 comes in, and this pawn is about to be lost. Hikaru has to respond, and now this kind of destabilizes this. We get rook d5, bishop c2, and queen to h6 offering a trade of queens. Rather than going forward with a check, which could have been possible, Hikaru trades and plays the move h4. Now g5 is the only way for MVL to make any more progress, but he plays rook d2, and this looks like it's over. But in astounding fashion, MVL blunders the move bishop f4 check. And that's why you always look for a check before you make any aggressive move. And Hikaru wins the first game and takes a 1-0 lead. Now, this match had so many twists and turns, okay? The next two games were drawn, so it's 2-1 after the first three games, all right? MVL then wins the fourth game, so now it's 2-2, okay? And the next game that we're going to pull up on the screen is game number 5. This is the fifth game now of the 5+1 Blitz. It's tied 2-2. I said there was going to be a lot of ties, and there's going to be a lot of lead changes. So again, we've got a kind of a similar situation here. Knight f6, d3, and you'll notice the game actually looks very similar. In fact, almost entirely identical to the first game. But this time, rather than letting Hikaru take and give away his dark squared bishop, MVL keeps his dark squared bishop on the board and plays knight f8. You know what they say, knight on f8, never mate. I think that's what they say, because the h7 square is always protected. Queen e2, c4 by MVL, knight h5 by Hikaru attacking that side of the board. He brings knight g6, a3, and the knight drops back out of the middle, activating the bishop. The knight goes to the middle, knight goes all the way back, and this pawn all of a sudden is not looking too great. So f4, but knight c5. This knight is doing some sort of, bending over here, and then here Hikaru throws a punch f5, and MVL says, ha! Rook takes d4. What? What? Ha? 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 Take knight to b3, hitting the rook. Hikaru, like any normal human, takes the knight. I mean, you know, the point is that you can't take this yet because what'll happen here is very bad. So hg6, and he's got 2 hanging pieces. So Hikaru, he's good at math. He knows that the knight is worth less than the rook, so he might as well save the rook. But actually here, he shouldn't have done that. The engine is a scumbag and wants him to go queen g4. The point being that, for example, if gh5 is played, you cannot stop mate. Like, there's just a checkmating attack running toward your king. If g6, I sacrifice, it's over. It's just over. Instead, Hikaru plays rook a2, but what happens next is MVL doesn't chase the rook. He just goes for a position where he's down in exchange. It's a bishop for a rook, but Hikaru never gets a moment to get his rook into the game. MVL plays queen c6, threatening mate. You can't push this pawn, because I take it, even here, en passant. So we gotta defend mate. Now rook to d8 cuts the open file. Bishop e3 to develop the bishop, and you're just a move short. Bishop c5. e6, because the point is, if you take here, I'm taking with check, and when you go here, I'm bringing in my rook. You know, you just play the whole game down a rook. Hikaru is 1 move away from stabilizing everything, and he's unable to do so. And after e6, MVL allows the capture on f7 and just sidesteps. Remember this from another recap? Umbrella pawn? Don't take the pawn. Hide behind it if it's attacking your king. b4, and now everything falls apart. Take with check. Take. Hikaru gets the rook down there, but now the king takes, and there's no way to tie it all together. This looks like mate, but just queen takes. And here Hikaru resigns. MVL wins 2 5+1 games in a row, and he is now up 3 games to 2. The next game that I'm going to show you, the next game was drawn, so it was 2.5, 3.5, and then Hikaru won 3 straight games. So the score going into the final game, 5.5 to 3.5. He won 3 games, and he has a chance to win 4 as I show you the final game of the 5+1. He has a chance to put the match away early. Let's see if he's able to do so. We get e4, e5. Hikaru this match was rocking in the Spanish. He was looking for Berlins, but early on it didn't go so well, so he started playing the Spanish in a King's Indian style, like this. It's a good lesson for some intermediate and advanced players watching. Good way to fight against the Rui is to play like this. Now MVL goes for h4, wild. h6 from Hikaru, d3, knight e7, and knight back to e2 rotating. Pandemonium breaks loose. I don't even know what is going on this side of the board, but Hikaru can't play f5. So we get d5 instead, and c5, and c6, c3, chop chop, and bishop e6. Out of the opening, Hikaru is looking beautiful. More space, MVL's position looks absolutely dreadful. Hikaru's already got a 2-game lead. Let's get it up to 3. Castles. Knight g3, queen d7, knight f5. The only active piece that MVL has, so Hikaru chips away at the center of the board and gets rid of that piece. Now, f3, bishop d3, queen moves. The move here, which wins the game for Hikaru on the spot, is the move g4. This is winning because it completely destroys the center. If take, we get bishop takes. The queen has access in, not right away, but in the future. And the g-file is closed off, and the bishop can rotate around. Hikaru instead rotates around without breaking. This gives MVL a little bit of a chance. So he starts stabilizing. Look what he does. Routes his knight to g4, hits h6 and f6 and e5. Hikaru in this position also can again sacrifice and break open the center. For example, here, here, and this. And then get his rook to, not d4, to d3 or d2. And he's winning. g4, queen f3, it's very bad. But Hikaru doesn't do that, and again, sometimes you have to. And what happens next is MVL is able to hide his king behind a pawn and a knight, and while this looks really pretty, it's not accomplishing anything. And MVL simplifies. Get rid of your opponent's attacking pieces. Look how dangerous this looks for the king. But he's safe, right? His king always has a getaway square, and the knight is covering the mate. He's trying to mate him. Queen d1. Now that everything gets traded, MVL trades all the pieces, and begins to make some progress of his own, right? Hikaru plays a2, f6 check, king only move. Rook a2, rook c3, rook comes back, rook f3, and in this position, Hikaru plays rook to f5, losing the game because after check, king g8, e6, while you have this pawn, I give you one simple check, and my pawn is faster. If king f8, e7 check, check, and the pawn promotes. I'm there before you're there. And if the king goes to the corner, you cannot stop my pawns from coming down. I'm mating you before you make a queen. Hikaru, if he had played rook e3, would have saved this game. What is the difference? White cannot play e6. That is the difference. Is because with the rook on f5, white can still play e6. In this position, you cannot do that, and this will simply be a draw. That one difference allows MVL to get out of a losing streak and escape the 5-1 with just a 1-game deficit, which moves us to the 3+1 section. The first 2 games of the 3+1 were draws. So the score is now 6.5 to 5.5. And we're going to pick things up with the third game. Let me just, with the third game of 3+1. A Sicilian, much more of the same, right? Much more of the same. We've seen this before, but now a slightly different change of pace right here, because MVL takes on e5 and then takes again and says, wait a second, I don't understand what the hell's wrong with taking on e5. Notice that he hadn't been doing that. Well, Hikaru shows what's the problem. It's h7. That's the problem. Check and queen h5. And MVL resigns. The shortest game of the entire match. 19 moves the third game. Hikaru back up by 2, 7.5 to 5.5. And this is losing because you're threatening a mate. You're simply threatening a mate. And queen h6, there's knight f7. While you can take, the point is that I'm not going to take this. When my knight moved, it opened the gate for my bishop. And you will simply lose your queen. This is still hanging and the game is over. A stunning blunder. The shortest game of the entire match. And it goes in Hikaru's favor. But MVL would bounce back in game number 4. So MVL would bounce back again. Hikaru has a 2-game lead again and can't make it 3, 7.5, 6.5. And the next game that I'm going to show you is the 5th game of the 3+1. Hikaru's got the white pieces. It's another one of these, right? Looks very similar. Similar. This time MVL doesn't take, and Hikaru brings the knight back to g3. Okay, knight f8, queen e2, and c4. Now Hikaru chops down the A file, so this is slightly different, but MVL's got a very nice active rook. H4 going for an attack. MVL says, I don't give a damn about no attack. B4, what's up on c3? Take. Bishop b1. So we've seen this before, lining up these bishops. Now rook d8, a very nice move. This is a very high-level move. In all of this, MVL is not worried about the attack on his king. He's worried about one thing, and one thing only, and that is the d3 square. Getting a knight to the d3 square. h5 and knight d3. Hitting everything in white's position, like in the future, and having him take. And now MVL doesn't have a c-pawn. He's got a d-pawn, and that pawn is 2 squares away from promotion. A thorn in white's position. And here, another beautiful move from MVL. Killing the long-range sniper. Bishop takes f3, because you cannot take with a queen since d2 forks. Using this pawn to his advantage, white has to take and damage his structure. And now, screwing it in. Queen c2. Look at that. Every move. Knight d7, this move. Looking to get in here with the knight. Hitting everybody. Not taking, because that helps the pawn get further. Rook comes in, hits the queen. The back rank is weak, but no one can get there. Queen e3, and now a quiet killer. Setting up the move, bishop to g5. So we get f4, and the bishop says, I didn't need to go to g5. I can also go to b4. GG, yo. The whole of black's pieces, every single one got involved in this game. Gorgeous coordination. The rook is dead. The pawn is promoting. Amazing win by MVL in the 5th game of 3+1. And the score is all square again. MVL 2-0 in games 4 and 5. The next game was a draw, so it was 8. All right, the score is 8-8. The next game that I'm going to show you after that is the 8th game of this match. Okay, in the 8th game, Hikaru won the 7th. So he's up now 9-8. We're going to jump ahead to the score being 9-8. Okay. And Hikaru in the 8th game of 3+1 is looking to make a statement. Because again, every time he's had a lead, MVL has managed to fight back. So Hikaru is up 9-8. He's got the black pieces in this one. And again, thematic match of going back to this King's Indian, right? D6, H3. And the players really started fighting early in this one. They got the bishops off the board, but it's super imbalanced. Isolated pawn. I got 4 on this side. You only have 3. I got the open rook. My light squares are a little weak like this, right? But knight d5. Queen d7, and now I want to bring my rook and get this knight in the game, not to mention different sacrificing ideas, as well as knight to f4. b3, rook e8, knight g3, take, and knight c6. Let's not forget, you also do have a, bad pawn on d4. I'll go after that as well if I want. Knight f6, queen h4. MVL says, I don't even know what you think you're attacking. I'm going to get my queen to your king. Rook e1, take. Now, because there's like about 10 minutes, I would say, 10-15 minutes remaining on the timer, Hikaru's going to play this position forever because he's got a 1-game lead. So the more you milk the game clock just trying to put pressure on your opponent, the better. So Hikaru just making simple queen moves. Queen f4, knight e7, finding a way to route the knight to the center. h5. Sometimes the game changer will be a random flank pawn push because it wins space. And by getting in here, it's a thorn, just like last game, not allowing the knight to stay in this area. That's exactly what Hikaru does. His pawn ends up making it to the h4 square, and he's got this nagging pin. And again, in all endgames, the 4-on-3 here is very nice for black. Because think about that, as everything simplifies, one pawn will remain. That pawn will try to make it down to the other side of the board. And at the same time, MVL can't really move anything. And since this pawn is here, the dark squares, oh, they're so weak. Notice how many pawns are on light. Notice how the queen and the knight defend all the dark squares and fight for them. And then Hikaru snuck in with his queen. And MVL's queen is off to the side. So now is the moment we strike. Check. And the knight jumps in. And knight f1 and the king can't get out because of that flank pawn push that Hikaru did some moves ago. Queen b5, now the kill shot. d5. We're not hunting down the king, we're making it so your knight can't move. If your knight goes to c5, it roams away from the king, it can no longer defend the king, and the queen cannot give a check to the king, it's too far on the other side of the board. So we get knight d2, queen e1, MVL defends his knight, but he doesn't defend his king. Queen g3. And the hero is this h4 pawn, defending the queen, and MVL resigns because of this. Hikaru, once again, takes a 2-game lead, but MVL couldn't be stopped. Every time Hikaru would pull away, MVL would win, and he won the next game, and the last game of the 3+1 ended in a draw, so the overall score in the 3-1 was 5 games each. It was 5.5, 4.5, they each added 5 points. So it's a 1-game match, and now we begin 30 minutes of bullet chess. 1 minute and 1 second bonus. We will start with the first game of bullet, because that's where things already got spicy. Hikaru plays knight f3, which is his specialty. He plays a lot of these kind of fianchetto systems, easy development systems. But things started getting murky. Pawns got traded. Both sides have this sniper over here, but one guy's got a bishop this way and the other guy bishop over there. And MVL says, hey, who's the most powerful piece on the board? The queen. Hikaru says, I'm gonna block your queen. Queen rotates. Queen is able to get very far, right? b4 sends the knight back. a3 stabilizing the queen side. Rook c8, bishop b3, bishop d5. Rook c1, knight f8. Hikaru plays the move e4. Now this move would change the game, because after this, knight e5, rook takes. This is not hanging. There are various tactics associated with this move. But bishop d6. That's the problem. The pawn push destabilized the dark squares, just like last game. 3 pawns on light squares means your dark squares are unstable, and rather than playing f4, which would have resulted in a queen trade and sacrificing a pawn, Hikaru goes all in with knight c6, take. He cannot take back because 2 things defend here. Instead he goes g4, hitting the queen. Queen's under attack. But MVL finds a gorgeous shot. Danger levels. You don't have to move your queen if you can create a threat on your opponent that's equal or exceeding. What's equal to a queen? A queen. MVL says, you're not going to ever take this, because bishop to b5. Now if you take my queen, I get your queen. Hikaru says, what if I go here? MVL says, I got you. Queen h6. My queen's out of danger. I got this, and I see your rook in the future. And after rook e1, knight g6. This knight can't move. Queen h2. Rook e2, and MVL says, bing, bang, boom. And that's the end of the game. The pin. It's not about attacking the king. It's about how all the pieces coordinate. And MVL wins the first game of bullet. That's what happens. MVL wins the first game of bullet. MVL evens the match. It is 10.5 all. There's about 24 minutes on the game clock. We go to the second game of bullet. Hikaru's got to fight back. MVL in this game's got the white pieces. This one was a long game. It was an Italian. It was a maneuvering game. They played a system they played in the Skilling Open against each other. Slightly different. And Hikaru started chugging away and sacked his A-pawn. He did that to win dark squared real estate and double his structure over here. But then Hikaru couldn't quite decide. You see, he's playing on the queen side, right? But then he's also playing on the other side of the board. MVL plants these knights. Before we get into this game, I just want to say, this is the most insane game of chess you will probably ever see. Are you ready? Okay. I'm ready. G3, Hikaru plays F5. Top, chop, rook B5. What? Well, the point is the knight and the bishop are both under fire. So Hikaru says, all right, to hell with those guys. E4. Sacrifices this. E takes D3. Now, at this point, MVL has a lights out move, which is knight to F6 check. And if Hikaru takes, he has knight takes H6 check. And king and bishop are both hanging, and the queen gets into H5. Instead, he plays queen F3, hitting this and saying, I don't care if you take my bishop, but now danger levels. Bishop to E4 hits the queen, and this is still hanging. So MVL says, all right, I'm going to sack my queen. So what's the count? Hikaru's up 2 points. He's got a queen. MVL's got 4 minor pieces, 2 bishops, 2 knights. And MVL is also up 1 pawn, so 2 pieces and a pawn for a queen. Hikaru plays rook back to E6, rook D5, queen to E8, C5. Hits the rook. Hikaru says, take my rook. I'm good. MVL says, you would have thought I was going to take your rook. Knight to F4. Thanks for walking into my pin. My bishop is worth more than your rook. My bishop is more powerful. Hikaru says, rook A4. Blocking the pin, sacrificing. MVL says, I'm going to take that rook. That was the wrong rook to take. Now, Hikaru, instead of taking back here, should take on F4 first. He doesn't do that. Now MVL plays C6, opening the door to the bishop. Hikaru slides the bishop back, rook to D7, using that pawn as an entrance point. This threatens knight to F6 because of the pin. So Hikaru plays king G8, blundering the move knight H5. And now from winning, directly back to losing because you cannot stop rook G7 and knight F6, sacrificing a knight but triple forking all your pieces. Queen to E6, knight takes G7. Again the wrong move because queen C6. Knight to F5. You cannot take the rook because knight to F6 is once again a fork. Hikaru plays rook E6, blundering knight G takes H6 check, and now white is winning once again. King goes to F8, rook goes to G7. King goes to E8, he has to keep running. Bishop to G5. This is so terrifying. This king does not have any legal moves except for going back to F8, and we are not going to do that. Hikaru plays D3. MVL is completely winning here. He plays the move knight to G4, blundering the fact that queen E4 here is possible, hitting this knight, and the knight's got nowhere to go. Also queen B5. 2 completely disgusting engine moves. Instead, Hikaru plays a defensive move knight F8. After bishop back to E3, MVL blunders the advantage once again. Hikaru should push here, but he takes, and hangs a fork. Hikaru once again blunders back the advantage. Now as he is going to lose this rook, there is no way for him to push this pawn through. He simply lacks the material, and it took MVL a little bit of time to convert this, as Hikaru was defending very resourcefully, but the end is really nice. The end is really nice. He plays knight D5, blocking the queen pin to the king, and after a few checks, look at that. He goes rook E4, blocking this, and knight E7. And with just mere seconds on the clock, MVL wins the second bullet game and takes a 1-game bullet lead. Takes a 1-game lead in the match, I should say. 11.5 to 10.5. Absolutely unbelievable. I mean, this match was insanity. So now MVL is up. The next game of the bullet was a draw. The next game of the bullet was a draw, so the score is now 11 for Hikaru and 12 for MVL. They drew the third game of the bullet. Next game I'm going to show you is the 4th game. Black pieces for Hikaru. We're going to zip on through the opening because we've already seen this, but a little bit different this time. But now we get D4, more of the same, and we get this. Hikaru plays knight back to A6, rerouting the knight to the better square of C5. Bishop E3, he goes here, and he plays b4. MVL here says, I kind of don't like that, because he's gonna go b3, his bishop's very active, let me take. Hikaru says, I'm not gonna take your bishop, I'm gonna take this. Then I'm gonna take this, thanks. Bishop to d4, cb2. And after the trade, MVL misses that here, Hikaru has danger levels. Don't care about the pawn. Counterattack. En passant, queen c3, but now, queen b6. How are you actually going to win this pawn back? Rook d1, knight to e5. I'm going to trade the knights, trade all the pieces down. Rook d2, bishop e6. Wait a second. Wait, what's happening here? Knight d4. What is happening here? Rook e1, rook c8 hitting the queen. Queen moves out of the way. Hey, that bishop is looking really good defensively, right? What if we kill it? Rook takes c2. We have a new queen. 2 queens for black, 3 queens on the board in total, and on move 32 for the white pieces, MVL resigns the game, and it is all square once again. 12-12, it's a brand new match with about 15 minutes remaining. It's basically a pick'em. The next game is the 5th game of Bullet. B3. This time, a similar setup as that first Bullet game, but this time MVL doesn't go for d5. He plays a little bit more passively like this and goes for c5. Rook d1 by Hikaru, rook e1, and he plays for e4. They trade, rook d8, bishop slides back to f1, so the rooks are the chief defenders of the 2 squares, and maybe you will rotate the bishop out this way. Which is exactly what Hikaru does. MVL plays h5, looking to instigate. Hikaru plays h3. Says, all right, if you're going to come with h4, I'm going to play g4. So now I'm blocking you out, right? I'm not taking the free pawn and damaging my structure. Knight f3, knight to e6, looking for this. Bishop c1, knight to h7, knight d5. So the first trade occurs, this little cascading pawn structure. Rook is blocked, but this rook is activated, and the queen looks in this general direction. Knight to g5. We get knight d4. Beautiful move. Beautiful move, taking advantage of the pin. That's so important in this position, because now the knight plops itself into c6, and that's that thorn again. You got that little prickly thing in your position that you can't move around. Queen d3, MVL wants to create counterplay because his pieces are stuck. They're all tripping over each other. e4, sacrificing a pawn and going for a trade. But Hikaru says, so what? I trade everything. I'm up a pawn. What are you going to do to me? These don't look too good. That doesn't look too good. Rook e2, a4, you're not taking that. But I'm taking on, I'm gonna go get that pawn. MVL says, no, you're not. Bishop g5, knight d7, rook e3. Simplify, you're up a pawn. Simplify. No, sir. But what about that pawn on h4? Remember that pawn that you pushed? Now I'm up 2 pawns. Knight c5, you could take that. Remember that lesson that we had a few games ago? The piece on the opposite side of the board can't defend the king? Bishop f6. And with this one quiet move, MVL resigned. He resigned this game because the rook is hit, and let's say the rook goes to c2 to hit the pawn. No one's guarding your king, man. I'm about to swarm in here. Very instructive lesson. When pieces are too far from the king and some pieces are too close, you're not going to get back fast enough. So it's worth losing some material because you're going to get to the king very fast. So bishop f6 occurs, MVL resigns the 5th game of Bullet, and Hikaru is now up 13-12. And for the remainder of this match, I have no more games for you. I actually have no more games for you. I'm simply going to show you what happened. We began the Bullet section right here. We are currently right here. Hikaru won that game with 99%. Hikaru went on to win the next 3 games. They drew, and he won the last 2 games of the match. Hikaru finished the Bullet with a score 8-3. And Hikaru wins the match overall 18.5 to 12.5. It was close. But once Hikaru went down 1 game in the Bullet, he stormed back like something I'd never seen. He drew 1 game, and then he won 7. After that, he went 7.5 out of the next 8 games versus MVL. Granted, of course, that once the time was expiring, MVL was slightly tilted and, played some slightly dubious openings. But Unbelievable. Unbelievable match where both players had a lead for 3 different occasions. Hikaru had a 2-game lead 3 times that he couldn't build on. MVL had a 1-game lead 3 times he couldn't build on. MVL was never up by 2. He was only up by 1 3 times. An epic match. A crazy, crazy, crazy turnaround in the bullet. And yeah, just once again to reiterate, you know, making these recaps for all of you is so much fun. Keeping up this energy in Blitz and Rapid format. I don't know how I can make long games more exciting, but I'll do my best. I hope to keep doing this. For now, the recaps do come to an end. Congratulations to Hikaru for winning the Speed Chess Championship, and overall a ton of money. I think over 20,000 overall. And MVL, what a competitor! I mean, what an epic match in the Blitz. And Hikaru did run away with it in the bullet in the end, but wow, fantastic stuff. So you made it this far. As always, as you know, I'll say leave a comment, like the video, recommend it to a friend, subscribe if you haven't already, and I look forward to making more of these. Take care.